So, if you're familiar with my story, you'll understand why financial independence is extremely important to me. My mom was a stay at home mom. She chose to be a stay at home mom while my dad built a very successful business. And so there was no real need for her to work in any event, not from a financial perspective. And unfortunately, when I was about the age of 8, my dad ended up abandoning us. And in that process, we also went from quite a fairly abundant home to one that was riddled with scarcity. My stay at home mom had to eventually find a job, sometimes working 2 jobs at a time, just to be able to take care of 4 children on her own. And so life was pretty challenging. But if it's one lesson that I learned from that entire experience is how important it was for a woman to maintain some sort of financial independence, whether you choose to stay at home and be a stay-at-home mom and not have a career, or whether you choose to be, in a partnership or a marriage and pursue a career. I think it is extremely important that you maintain some sort of financial independence. So why is that important? First of all, because our future is never guaranteed. Things happen, shit happens. um, you know, your relationship could come to an end. Your partner could pass away way before you even thought possible. And your partner could also leave you, or you could choose to leave your partner. A lot of women choose to stay in toxic relationships, in relationships where they're not happy because they don't have the financial independence to leave, or they don't want to make the lifestyle changes that they know they need to make in order to live a happier, more peaceful life. And so those are some of the reasons why financial independence, first of all, is extremely important. So how do you navigate through some of the challenges that we as women face when it comes to building that financial independence? I think the first thing for me is to always have a plan and a plan B. And I always tell this to a lot of women, whether you are married, whether you are happy in a relationship, to always have a plan B. Because when the shit hits the fan, you want to know that you have options available to walk away. And so having a plan, and whatever that plan looks like, so let's talk about plan A. If you have a plan together with your partner, there are some important, whether you have a plan A and whether that is with your partner or your spouse, there are some awkward and difficult conversations that need to be had around money. And I always say that, a person's true colors come out when the shit hits the fan. And that's true for both men and women, right? Because when you are in a happy relationship, boundaries are clear, everything is happy, because you're in that happy space, everything is clear, there are boundaries, there are joint goals, there's more than likely an agreement in terms of how things are going to play out. And so setting those financial or having those financial discussions and agreements is a lot easier. But where the trouble comes in is when the shit hits the fan. And that's when the ugliness comes out. That's when there are disagreements about who pays what, how assets get split, etc., etc. So the best time to be having this conversation is when things are going well. And, I've created a tool for different stages of a relationship. So whether you're single, whether you're dating, whether you're moving in, whether you're getting engaged, married, whether you're splitting up, going your separate ways and dealing with death, there are a whole lot of questions that you can pose to your partner, which is good not only for the women, but also for men as well, because then there's some clarity in terms of what it is you want to achieve together, how things will be split in the event of a separation. And those are important conversations to have, so at least that there is some clarity going forward. Now, even if a divorce were to happen later down the line, it doesn't mean that those answers that your spouse gave you is gonna be executed. Obviously, there is legal implications and financial implications that need to be taken into consideration when splitting or separating. But I think having had those conversations up front, first of all, gives you some clarity on how they think and how they feel. And, based on the honesty of those answers, the next thing that you need to do is to figure out what your plan B is. And so, again, how you are married, whether it's community of property, whether it's accrual, ANC with or without accrual, those, or whether even if there's no marital contract in place, you need to make sure that you have some sort of plan B where you can maintain some sort of financial independence. And so, there's nothing wrong with having separate savings. Not everything needs to be held jointly. So you can have separate savings and you can let your partner know about that as well. I mean, I think that's important when you are building a trusted relationship. So make sure you have a plan B so that if the shit does hit the fan, that you are able to walk away and that you are able to take care of yourself as well as any dependence that might be born out of that relationship or previous relationships. So that's the first thing. The second thing is to look at ways of increasing your income and your net assets or your net asset worth. And how you do that is by either focusing on building your career or by wealth accumulation. So if you're looking at building your career, I think one of the important things to talk about is self-doubt and imposter syndrome. And this is something that I personally experienced in my corporate career. And a lot of it stemmed from my childhood experiences of being abandoned. I felt, obviously, I questioned my self-worth a lot through the years. And that played up and showed up in my career. So when there was a senior position that was advertised, what would I do? I wouldn't apply for it. Or I'd look at the job spec or the specifications or the requirements. And if there was 10 requirements on that job spec and I could only fill 6 or 7, I still would not apply because I felt that I did not have all the criteria that was required for that position. And so I wouldn't apply. Whereas what I found was happening with my male colleagues is that they would apply irrespective of whether they had 4 or 5 of those criteria being met. And so I think a lot of the times our self-doubt creeps in, our imposter syndrome creeps in, and that prevents us from applying for senior positions. It prevents us from taking on additional responsibility and asking for what we're worth. Another thing that also plays a role in terms of whether we achieve or that can prevent us from achieving financial independence is our role as nurturer and caretaker. And, obviously when we decide to have kids, we are taking time off from work. And that gap in our career, whether we choose to take 4 or 5 months off from work or longer, and even if we choose to take 5 months off and our children get sick, we are the preferred caretaker and nurturer. I mean, which child not many children will ask for their dads when they are sick. They want their mommies. So again, the guilt that we experience from taking time off from work to take care of our children doesn't really help us to apply for those senior positions, because with the senior position comes additional responsibilities. And so that is something that can also steer us away from applying for those senior positions. I remember when I had my daughter, I felt that I wasn't living up to my title of manager. And so I decided I wanted a more flexible role. And I resigned from my management role to take on something that afforded me a lot more flexibility. I'll give you another example. A couple of months ago, my daughter underwent surgery to remove her wisdom teeth. And naturally, I was the one that took time off from work. And running my own business means that I can't afford to not be focusing on building my business. But again, it was a choice I made and I have no regrets around it. I had a client meeting on the Wednesday, which was pushed to the date of my daughter's surgery, and I declined. Not for any other reason other than, my daughter's health was most important, and I made that choice. In fact, excuse the dogs. And ultimately what ended up happening was that And ultimately what ended up happening was that the choice or the decision that I had made actually affected my business, in the sense that that client up till today has completely ignored my request for a follow-up meeting. So, these are some of the real challenges that we as women are facing in terms of gaining financial independence, which makes it a lot more difficult for us as opposed to men. So I just wanted to point out a few of those things, and hopefully it helps you to gain some insights in terms of what you need to do in order to make sure that you work towards maintaining and building your financial independence.